Hey, hey, hey.
There you are.
Here we are.
Yep.
There's Jews and Jews. I was going to say there's Jews in tunnels.
Yes.
But now I'm hearing that they're Jewish pedophiles in tunnels, which makes it the same thing. I mean, so no, I just spent, because of you, the better part of the last 3 hours listening to my buddy Gavin McInnes debate Nick Fuentes and some other dudes over there on that part of the right wing debating Israel.
Yeah, Gavin.
I'm a little dumber. I'm a little dumber now, I have to say. A little, kind of like shaved off some of the edges of my brain there, but no, they've spent a good 30 to 45 minutes debating whether they were raping children in the tunnels under the synagogue in Brooklyn. And 3 of the 6 guys, I think, said, "Oh no, I know they're fucking kids under there. There's no doubt about it." And these were like guys like a major Elijah Schaefer, major editor at Gateway Pundit and The Blaze, I guess. Like, these are big guys, you know, in that world, and like he just knows that's what those tunnels were about. It's amazing. It was also funny to see Gavin, and there was a Zionist guy on there,
Adam King from InfoWars.
Adam King. The first time I've seen, that's right. This is the first time I've seen anybody on the right in years defend anything or anyone from charges of pedophilia, to deny the claims. First time I've seen anyone on the right deny any claims of raping children was when these guys were when the synagogue, the Chabad Lubavitcher synagogue, was being accused of hosting tunnels for rape of children. Oh God.
Well, the official story is kind of funny. You know the official story on the synagogue?
It changes all the time.
Yeah.
There's like 6 versions, right?
Their version was a bunch of young radical extremists.
Like Zionist extremists? Or,
radical Zionist extremists took it upon themselves to build the tunnels on their own. Like, they're all pinning it on these young guys who just came in. And it's like, how do you not notice that you have tunnels being built under your synagogue and that you have Mexicans being housed there for 3 weeks to build these things?
Right.
Yeah.
These so-called illegal Mexican immigrants were the ones who did the labor, right? It was these young Zionist extremists, so-called, who were directing them in doing this. And then the leadership of the synagogue itself, the story is, knew none of this, knew nothing about this. I don't know. I mean, are they really kid rape tunnels? I mean, why do we? The point is, these days, and this is sort of new. I mean, it is new. Like, in the last 2 years, like, this is what everybody on the right just jumps to immediately. They can't stop thinking about pedophilia and having sex with children. It's wild. I mean, it's incredible. It's like every opportunity they get, they want to talk about sex with children. I mean, I'm like, who's got the problem here? And then applying it to this story, what is it about, like, that synagogue in Brooklyn that would make you suspect that? Is there some history? We don't know of any. There's some rumors, sure, about this or that, but there's rumors about every institution. Do we assume this when something is discovered at a Boy Scout headquarters? No, but we know that there's been plenty of sex with children in the Boy Scouts. Don't get me started about, you know, the Catholics, etc., or the Catholic Church, I should say. But this right-wing obsession with pedophilia, and also it's at the center. Even this, I was watching the Owen Benjamin thing last night, which was completely hilarious. I mean, he's openly racist. I find some racism really funny, as did Richard Pryor. You know, I don't know if I agree with a single thing he thinks, but it's really funny, and he has some interesting takes, especially in Indian culture and Vivek. But, you know, I think it was 3 hours ostensibly a conversation or a debate about Vivek Ramaswamy, and then it was about Indian culture. But at some point, of course, they start talking about kid fuckers. It's like there's got to be a kid fucker in every story now on the right wing about any political issue. Have you seen? I mean, I'm not exaggerating. It's like every pro-Israel person's story about October 7th includes mass rape and beheaded babies, like every single one. And every right-wing discussion about any political issue includes having sex with children. I mean, when there is zero evidence available. We're not talking about Epstein Island. And even that, there's some of that that's debatable about, was it actually pedophilia, which is defined as sexual attraction to children who are prepubescent. I mean, which is just such a teeny tiny fraction of the population is actually pedophilic in that way. And was that what was going on Epstein Island? Whether it was right or wrong, it wasn't that. I don't think. There's no accusations of prepubescent children. So again, the accusation is just so extreme and wild, and clearly, if it ever lands on anybody, it's the most damaging thing. It's so irresponsible. It's so stupid. It's so lazy. It's so sexually reactionary in the most grotesque ways. Because all you're doing is you're deploying these fantasies you have yourself onto the other people. Then it becomes their major explanatory agent. It's like they've become what is it, pedophile reductionists or something? You know, like Marxists rely on class to explain everything. Libertarians rely on economics to explain everything, and Marxists too. And now the right wing just relies on kid fucking, which they use that word, by the way, to explain everything. Oh, they were and all this stuff about Israel. The section, right? Nick Fuentes, who's on the other side of this debate, or no, he's attacking Israel. One of his big attacks is, oh yeah, they're also pedophilic. Israelis, and I know there's like some stories about, I don't even remember. I mean, sure. I mean, they've been Israeli pedophiles, but like, who hasn't had Israeli pedophiles? I don't know if they're like disproportionate there, but that's nonetheless, it's sort of like one of these key arguments for why we shouldn't support Israel, that is actually a pedophilic nation. I mean, until we see some kind of evidence, fellas, of any of this shit, like actual evidence, can we like be a little smarter? It's also so juvenile. It's the kind of thing, 16-year-old boys throw at each other. Oh, God. It's just, the right wing has been so fucking juvenile and stupid lately about so many issues. And now Israel comes along. Here we go again, watching much of the right wing show how retarded it is. Another big word used on the right wing. This debate, these guys knew some stuff. I wouldn't say, I mean, compared to the people who I've been hanging out with and listening to recently, they're half educated, I would say, compared to the Max Blumenthals of the world. And so, I mean, what's interesting is there is a split, and I'm so glad you brought this to my attention, and this is really the major point here. There's a split on the right wing about this very important issue. And when I say the right wing, I mean the dissident right, the Trump, and then whatever you want to call the post-Trump right. Not the establishment Republicans, but the dissident right wing, which is far, far bigger and more powerful than the establishment Republicans, by the way. I mean, they control everything except for the Republican Party, the dissident right. The Gavin McInneses of the world control basically everything on the right except for Fox News and the Republican Party itself. But even in there, we know there are many, many, many congressional staffers for Republicans who have read Bronze Age Pervert and are huge. And there's even more people, I think, who are fans of Curtis Yarvin, who work for Republican congresspeople on Capitol Hill. So even the dissident right is gaining ground, and Trump is part of the dissident right. Trump is he's the leader of the dissident right. And he's about to become president, or at least the leader of the Republican Party de facto. So these people are very big and important and powerful, and this is why I've been focusing on them like a laser for several years now, because I've been dying. It's been essential to understand where they would go after Trump was out of office and after January 6th. What would they fizzle away after all this repression, after the establishment took the election from them, which it did in many ways, or I should say, at least in some ways, if not outright like stuffing ballot boxes, which I still think probably happened. But even without that having happened,
Well, so does Putin, as we heard this week.
what was this? What's the latest about Putin?
Oh, Putin said publicly that the 2020 election was stolen quite transparently through mail-in ballots. And it's funny, some textbooks have been found in Russia, and that's their explanation of the 2020 election, that it was stolen through fraud like that.
Oh, so Putin's taking Trump's side, you mean?
Yeah, well, he's taken it was a very obvious transparent steal. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought he'd already said that.
Mm-hmm. Well, he said it more publicly this week. Yeah.
It's actually a good question. I'm not sure. I don't know what his pronouncements on all that stuff have been, actually.
He was talking about it. I have the clip. He was talking about it in relationship to the elections in Ukraine, where members voted to have part of the Donbass join Russia. And he said those elections are transparent. The only way you could cheat an election is how the Democrats did in 2020.
Right. Yeah. And I know I can hear a lot of people saying, oh, Putin, who's he to talk? His elections are always rigged. I mean, even I don't know if they are. And from what I've seen, I doubt that they are. And even if they have been rigged in any way, it doesn't matter, because what's obvious, ask anybody who's ever been to Russia, including anti-Putin people. They'll tell you, yeah, his 80% poll numbers are real. Like something around 3/4 of the population loves the guy. Doesn't even matter. You don't need it. It doesn't matter. Elections are irrelevant if you've got that kind. That's better than Franklin Roosevelt had during the war. I mean, this is people who hate Putin, who've been there, who are experts on Russia, who are anti-Putinists, will tell you that. They'll also then say he rigs the election, and I'm like, why would he, dude? You just told me he's super popular among these Russians, and this is their rationale for, by the way, why we should eventually bomb Russians, people. Same rationale for Israel has for Gaza. The population supports the bad guys. So we got to kill them. All of them.
You were talking about the split on the right wing that's emerging.
Yeah, around Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a great, meaning the right, whatever. I don't even know what I'm part of anymore, but like the dissident wing, left and right. We had a great sort of coming together around Ukraine. Almost everybody on the left and dissident right were on the same side on Ukraine. It was great. It was beautiful. Like Gonzalo Lira, and we'll talk about him. It's just funny. Like Kit Clarenberg of the Gray Zone, who's been on Unregistered, great journalist, amazing journalist, has been detained by his own government, the UK government, simply for his reporting. I mean, detained and interrogated. He tweeted after Gonzalo died that he disagreed with everything in Gonzalo's politics except for Ukraine. And of course, his death was a terrible injustice. But then I remembered, of course, Gonzalo Lira came out of the the nastiest edges of the alt-right. He was
Coach Red Pill.
Coach Red Pill, dating was like a pickup advice artist. Like these were the true like original dregs of the alt-right.
Cernovich came out of there.
Yeah. And now Gonzalo was actually, I think, pretty smart and quite articulate. And I didn't realize this. I just found this out from the Duran guys. So I started listening to him on Ukraine like July of when the war started. And I just found out Alex Cristofaro just said this. And I found out about him from the Duran. He was on the Duran at that time all the time. I was like, oh, he must be an expert. And he lives in Kharkiv. Holy shit. He must be an expert. And he's there right now. Turns out he was doing nothing but red pill coaching and didn't know nothing about Ukraine or NATO as of February when the war started. The only reason he was there and the only reason he took this up was that his wife happens to be Ukrainian and lived there. And he saw an opportunity, I think. He was like, oh, geopolitics, big audience. Maybe I can do this. He had just started studying this shit.
Anyway. Real quick on the red pill side of things, the history of this is a lot of these dating coaches were saying that the West is completely fallen, that there are no good women in the West. And so a lot of them moved out to Ukraine to search for more traditional women. And that's
the trad wife, Ukrainian trad wife, and
the Ukrainian trad wife.
In the field, in the wheat field.
The passport bros.
Holding a bouquet of flowers and a baby, in each arm. And bread is baking in the oven, and she has just given you 3 straight blowjobs. And it's just all good from that, guys, I get it. That's a good fantasy. I really do get it. I understand why men who have never had sex with a woman would really want that. I get why that would be appealing to you. But we need to rethink that a bit. Anyway, so the right wing, the alt-right, the dissident right, the Trump right, the MAGA right, those people are having a Donnybrook over Israel because they hadn't talked about this, because it hadn't been an issue since they arose. Israel hasn't really been an issue here since 2014. And even then it wasn't that big, but that's the last time there was a major bombing of Gaza. So that was before any of this shit was happening. And so they haven't had to talk about it. Israel's this bizarre grenade that just sort of like lands itself in the middle of political coalitions every once in a while. The left is always fighting over it. Liberals are now fighting over it. They didn't used to. Liberals used to be all pro-Israel. Now they're split. So now the right, the interesting new right, which I know very well. And I've been Michael Malice's, I'm in his book. There's a page on me in his book on the new right. I told him I didn't belong in it, and he insisted I did, but whatever. Yeah, there's a fight going on. So Nick Fuentes is kind of the leader, turns out, of the anti-Zionist wing for obvious reasons, because he's sort of historically an anti-Semite, anti-Jewish, but in sort of, nuanced ways, actually. I was listening to him talk about this. I think he's one of the smarter people in this world. I would say certainly in this debate, he was the smartest guy by far. In fact, I would say he was the only respectable debater of I think it was 6 dudes in there going at it. He's actually quite good. He knows he knows his stuff, but he's quite good. He's a very, very smart kid.
Adam King is smart, but he's just self-interested.
No, I mean, he wasn't. I'd never heard the guy before, but in this debate, he was saying stuff. Again, when people talk about Israel, their minds melt partly. So I won't judge him on that. But when a lot of Jews talk about Israel, I should say, when Zionist Jews talk about Israel, it's like, oh, dude, you're just talking straight state propaganda. I don't know. How can we take you seriously? We know the Israeli government produced what you just said. So what? Well, it's amazing.
It takes a high IQ to memorize all that propaganda.
Yeah, not really. It's some of the dumbest shit in the world. And this, again, I know I've said this before, but like Max Blumenthal always says this. Like, I think Dan Cohen said this. I say it. Rabbi Shapiro says this all the time. It's like, one of the things that pisses off Jews the most is, again, that how stupid the Zionist arguments are. Not historically always, like the original Zionist arguments were a little crazy and fantastical, but like they were intellectually coherent, at least, Now it's just wild how dumb this shit. And it's just like, I when they say stuff, I instantly think, I'm like, oh my God, everybody's laughing at this, right? No one just, and then I'll see like a handful of like top journalists, some of whom are my friends on Twitter, be like, see, they did rape thousands of women on October 7th. I'm like, oh, Jesus. Did you read that story in the Times, New York Times, about 10 days ago, detailing the alleged rapes? Did you see the specific description of the rapes?
Well, there was no actual physical evidence in that story, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's number one. Yeah, there's zero forensic evidence. There is zero firsthand account. There is zero survivor or victim testimony. Zero. Not one woman has come forward and said I was raped. Hello? In what? No. There was a description, a lengthy, super specific description. Everyone should read this. I mean, it's so horrendous. It's laughable. It's horror movie stuff that, like, I mean, I don't think like a human being, even Jeffrey Dahmer, wouldn't really do this. I mean, certainly not in that moment. Like, it's just not. In which, okay, one of them has the woman bent over, is raping her from behind, and she gasps every time she's penetrated, and every time she gasps, he stabs her in her back. She's repeatedly gang raped by men doing the stabbing her back while they're raping her from behind, stabbing her back. Okay. Then another woman is being raped next to her. And then one of the men cuts off one of her breasts, throws the breast to one of the other Hamas guys. Then all the Hamas guys start playing catch with it. And then the story ends with, I think, 3 more women brought in to also be gang raped. But there was another something like they had bullet holes in there or something. Oh yeah, nails in their vaginas. Again, no forensic evidence, 0 of any of this. So these guys were conducting a military raid of one of the most powerful, highly surveilled militaries in the universe. And in fact, they were about to all get mowed down imminently. And it's amazing that it took as long as it did for the IDF. Guys doing the operation, they didn't know it was going to take the IDF hours to fully mobilize and get there, right? And it's such a tiny country. They had Apache helicopters all around them, ready to go. Trust me, they were in a hurry, but also, it's just the description itself, man. It's like, take the Kavanaugh description, the Brett Kavanaugh description of that alleged rape, combine that with the UVA fake rape thing. And I hope everyone's read those, you got to read them. Like, as soon as I read the UVA thing, I'm like, they threw her down onto a glass table, smashed it into smithereens, and then 10 guys raped her on top of the broken glass. I was like, why are we even discussing this? And that's less crazy than this story about the Hamas animals. Yes, I've seen video of one of those Hamas guys. I'm pretty sure it's a Hamas guy because he's wearing a headband. Very casually shoot 2 young women in the face. Pretty casually. I haven't seen a lot of those. I can't say I've seen definitively like shooting of civilians. I know it happened, but I saw 2. I still think about that all the time. I'm not saying these guys didn't do horrific shit. And were utterly sociopathic in what they did that day. Not all of them. I think most of them actually acted as doing very rational military operation. Much of what they were doing was a rational military operation, and we can talk about that, but just go listen to Max Blumenthal. But these descriptions of these mass rapes, and we know that historically, of course, what has every political movement in every war done? Pin rape accusations on the other side. This is like the oldest, most classic tactic, goes back to forever. Spanish-American War was fought over that very thing, which means the American Empire was launched, the global American Empire was launched over that very accusation. The Spanish were raping Cuban women.
World War I.
Yeah, always. Every time, always. Yeah. And, then I'm like, and I was always believe this. In fact, I used to teach it all the time. I used to be like, well, this is a standard tactic to sort of claim conquest of territory by conquering the women. You symbolically conquer the territory. It all sort of, we built this logic, or I built a logic around that too. And then I started like, where is the actual evidence? I'm not saying it didn't happen. I'm sure it happened. Well, we know that some happened in Srebrenica. We know that some happened by U.S. GIs after World War II, during World War II. Sure. But like in the numbers and in the savagery with which it's the savagery that they describe it with. It's just like, no, it's so ridiculous. But then there's no forensic evidence. So these guys were such animals that they did that to women, and you can't find a single bit of forensic evidence. What? They were rampaging, doing whatever they wanted with women for 5 hours, and you can't give us one piece of forensic evidence? You can't name one person? Nothing? Okay. So anyway, yeah. Israel's pedophiles or Hamas's pedophiles? Take your pick if you're on the right.
Well, it's
No, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. That's what it's come down to. You get to choose your kid fuckers. That's on the right. I mean, always these fucking arguments on the right boil down to that. Who's the kid fucker in this? I mean, it's Joe Biden. Okay, well, we're going to vote for Trump. We're going to be pro-Trump then. Who's the kid fucker in the Middle East? Is it the Muslims who allegedly, according to Owen Benjamin and I think Gavin McInnes, they're all kid fuckers? You guys know that? All the Muslims.
Owen Benjamin is pro-Islam, but yeah,
who worship their children. Actually,
well,
that's built into the culture. No, they're all kid fuckers. Yeah. And again, there's all sorts of sects within Islam, and yes, in Afghanistan there absolutely are some Muslim kid fuckers. But the 2 billion Muslims, overwhelmingly, I'm gonna say they're really not. In fact, they like to kill kid fuckers just like we do. Sorry.
Yeah. Man. I was going to say the whole rape thing goes back to like Helen of Troy. It's just built into our psyche. It's just something that activates our lizard brain that tells us to just go. And that's why it's always there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it taps into a bunch of stuff, but yeah. Right. So, and the propaganda, the rhetoric, the claims about it has never, ever been close whatsoever to the evidence presented. You know, I've seen some evidence of rape during war for sure, as I just said. And I'm sure there's a lot more evidence somewhere to be found, but we ain't seen it compared to what's been said. Anyway, so, yeah, sexuality and gender, interestingly, are front and center in foreign policy and war and peace and all these questions, turns out. And for that, just having that analytical insight into war, we have, guess who to thank? Feminist gender theorists. In fact, a whole bunch of queer theorists are the ones, motherfuckers, who were the first to notice that and write about it when I was coming up in the academy in grad school in the 90s. You started to see these books where like gender and foreign relations. How on earth could that be relevant? Psh, look at the Spanish-American War, she said. I remember that. I forget her name. Kristen Thompson, I think her name. Thomason. Young historian out of somewhere. And she wrote this whole book about this, like the gender in the Spanish-American War. And it was like, oh my God, the whole thing was about it. Like Americans only thought about the Spanish-American War in gendered terms. They thought about Cuba as a woman, and they thought about Spain as this sort of rapist cad of a man, plundering her and taking advantage of her. They saw the Filipinos as children and themselves as the good father. It was, and then the rape stuff and the savage sexual instincts of the Spaniards, on and on and on. I mean, it was basically the entire thing for the American public was about sex and gender. Incredible. And yes, as you said, World War I, all of them ever since. You see it all over the place in the ways in which we think about whether to go to war. I'm talking about the most important question is totally gendered every time. Every time. The United States has always positions itself as the protector father. That's been our role in the great family drama of the world. It's all our construction, of course, but that is why we go to war. That is why we kill people. That is why we conquer lands. That is why we are the global superpower. Is these very gendered ideas about who we are and what we should do. We are the dad, and you are our children. Look at, I mean, every piece of rhetoric about every war is all about that. So, and that's from gender theorists and queer theorists.
I'm thinking about American Sniper, where he talks about, I forget what it is, but like the wolves or the foxes or whatever. And basically the whole central argument in that is that you need strong men to act as the father for those who can't protect themselves. Which
you do.
Yeah.
You absolutely do. Like, that's my role in this house, right? It's like, I made that very clear. Like, you know, if something happens, I'm here. That's my job, because it has to be. Of course. I mean, if you're interested in protecting anybody, it's not, the man has to do it usually, 9 times out of 10. But that doesn't mean we have to then protect the children who are actually adults who live halfway around the world. Doesn't mean that they belong to us either. I mean, wait, huh? There are sons and daughters? What? Over in Africa and Bangladesh and all around the world, the Philippines, those are our kids. And that's exactly how we talked about them. When we conquered the Philippines and colonized them and began teaching their children literally, and they're building schools and in the Philippines and teaching them English and how to be American, it's exactly what was said. And that's exactly what was done. We treated that whole country as our child and all the people within it as our children. Uncle Sam was a father figure in all the cartoons and all the representations of Uncle Sam in the media. He was the father figure looking out over and for, on behalf of, in a protective way. He was always standing above these countries and looking down on them as if on a map of the world. You can see a lot of Uncle Sam cartoons of that era. Or the Uncle Sam as a teacher in a classroom with all the little children, the nations. I think you've seen that cartoon. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And these were famous. And when I say these cartoons, these were like the viral videos of the 19th century, 20th century. I mean, these were the biggest pieces of media, most popular pieces of media. So almost everyone saw those cartoons in the country. They were in like all the major newspapers and magazines, right? And people thought of Uncle Sam often, not always, of course, but I think most Americans thought of America as having that duty, which comes from gendered ideas about, you know, the family and relations between men, women, and children. And wow, wait, oh, that's what it's about? It's not about like economic supremacy. It's not even about like the evangelical mission, which I do think it's partly about, but like there's a really strong feminist, gender theory, queer theory argument, like really strong, that all of it is about that. Listen to these guys, Gavin McInnes and all these right-wingers, talk about foreign policy, who are for the empire in any way. I mean, it's all that kind of rhetoric. It's like, oh, those people over there, they're kid fuckers and they rape women and they burn their wives. And we have to go defend them, defend the women. Because we are not kid fuckers. We are good men. We are the true masculine men. They are the false masculine men. We will go protect. It's just the whole Sound of Freedom phenomenon. Completely that, right? We're going to go save. We are these buff, manly soldier dudes are going to go like risk their lives in some jungle country and save the women and children. Or children and women.
Yeah. Well, I think it gets so extreme. Also, we've talked about this. Just there's a lot of purposeless, lonely men out there. It's very easy to project your fantasies onto the rest of the world and, see yourself as being on the right side of history. See yourself as being a protector when you're completely atomized and don't have any sense of that in your own local community.
And you don't leave your screen.
Yeah.
Much less get in an airplane and fly to Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, clearly. And I think a lot of the alt-right, I mean, almost all of the alt-right guys who do that kind of stuff, that's what they're doing. I mean, because they're keyboard warriors, obviously. And they're sitting there fantasizing about like being the great protector of the world against the degenerates of the world. I'm like, you guys are, what were you looking at before you watched this podcast, bro? On your laptop, what were you looking at just before this? And how old was she when you were jerking off to her?
Or
seriously?
Well, like the Hunter Biden story is kind of the same thing, where you have all these right wingers telling you, "Oh no, I've seen it. He's definitely with a kid, and it's definitely his niece, and like those prostitutes in those pictures are definitely underage." Like, how did you see this stuff? Did you bookmark all of it? Like,
right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Did a lot of digging there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm. The other one that I saw related to this, speaking of idiot right wingers who are huge in the media, it wasn't. What's his name? Patrick Ben David himself. It was a sidekick.
Oh my God, Adam.
That guy.
Yeah.
That guy. Speaking of discrediting Jewish intelligence, was his name Adam Sosnick?
Yeah.
So I looked him up because I was so impressed with his IQ that I.
Were you watching the debate he had with Bassem Youssef?
Yeah. Yes. Gosh, that kid is dumb. Wow. So embarrassing. But like that show is gigantic. Yeah. I mean, and Ben, is it Ben David? David Ben, what's his name?
Patrick Bet David. I have a theory about that particular altercation.
He's dumb as fuck too. God.
Yeah.
Man.
Well,
sorry, he really is. I mean, of course he has some smart things to say about some things. Sure, of course. But boy, on most political issues, he is deeply naive, first of all, and just really doesn't have much to say. That's very deep at all. I mean, he is really fucking dumb and limited. But his sidekick, that dude, wow. Jews are supposed to be smart, homie. Stunningly stupid. And like all these arguments that were just like complete retread Hasbara, that's the name for Israeli propaganda. Not even coherently. Oh gosh. Anyway, what was I gonna say? Oh, so sex something. Oh shit, what was it? Something about being protectors, shit, or gender. Damn it, I forgot. Anyway, there was something came up in that debate in which was the same thing was projected as I forget the rationale for like supporting Israel and Zionism was something about gender. I forget. Anyway, sorry, I forgot. I'll remember it later. Yeah. The main point is that guy's an idiot. The main point is that guy's an idiot.
Sorry. Yeah. He's embarrassed himself a lot in front of a lot of different guests.
Has he? Good.
Jeez. Yeah. I think that's the point. I don't know if he's like playing the dumb sidekick or if like Patrick lets him drink a lot of alcohol on the podcast or something.
No, it's legit. That's I'm saying. Patrick himself is just a dummy. I mean, sorry, he just is. Like, I'm sure of certain business things he's super smart. Absolutely. I'm sure he's quite clever, as the British say, about some things. But man, about the stuff we talk about, you would never want him on here. What would you interview him about? What would you ask him? What are your thoughts on Israel? That guy has nothing to say. You think you're going to get like geopolitical analysis from him or any kind of deeper cultural analysis than like basically sports culture? You know, like got to lift yourself up by your bootstraps and every day's a new day. And don't think of the long run. Think of what you can do today to help you. What's the next 5 steps you're going to take? You know, and I got a book for that. It's called The Next 5 Steps You're Going to Take by Patrick. I'm just hating. I'm just envious. No, I am. I mean, I looked at the numbers. I was like, they got millions of subscribers and they're absolute boneheads. I just don't get it. And they get giant guests on there, like giant guests. They get everybody on there. Even I think was Glenn Greenwald on there. I think he was.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. Like super smart, giant people have been on there. Just so depressing. So depressing. I mean, Joe Rogan is like runs circles around those guys. I mean, Joe's actually very smart. I think he's, you know, he knows his stuff when he talks about it for the most part. I mean, he's legit. He's respectable. And Joe has 0 degrees. And, you know, this is not what I'm talking about. These cats are fucking thick. I guess Meathead is the Meathead. Isn't he from Glendale?
He's Iran. I think Patrick's is Iranian. But
yeah, I know. But then didn't he live in like in Glendale in LA?
That sounds right.
He's not Armenian, but there's an Armenian. Anybody who's been to Glendale knows exactly what I'm talking about. There's a culture there. It's all Armenian, and there's a culture there that it's very. I don't hate it. There's a lot of good like MMA fighters come out of there. The men are all super masculine. The women are all super femme, which I dig, you know. But there's a real like meathead, like weightlifter vibe, like ultra masculine macho thing. And then he's got that. And, you know, the successful business guy, he's got that guy. Oh, God, that's all fine if you're smart. I just don't, man. There's lots of smart business people. Anyway, I wish I could remember what the gender thing is. But anyway, everybody at home, think about this. Is something like U.S. foreign policy and geopolitics determined by gender or, you know, assumptions about gender? About, you know, ideas that everyone has about it. Is that what we're fighting wars about? I think there's a really good argument ultimately, right?
Well, we were talking about George Carlin the other day. He had a great bit where he was basically saying that he was saying this back in the 90s about the wars then, that it was all about masculinity. You know, the bombs are shaped like dicks, and in debates people would call each other wimps if you're not too aggressive on foreign policy, and everything was about posturing to be as aggressive as possible. I think I see that a lot with Biden. I think he's impotent in his old age and he's dropping bombs everywhere to prove that he has some power.
My mother, you just reminded me of something wild. My mother, when I was about 5 years old, gave a speech at an anti-Vietnam War rally in which she said the missiles and bombs being dropped on Vietnam are the product of a patriarchal society. They are phallic symbols being exploded on the people of Vietnam. And she stole that from George Carlin. So I don't know.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know. Yeah, well, I guess she must have. I
Mhm.
had forgotten that Carlin had said that. And this was right around 19. She would have given this speech around 1970, I guess. So he was, I think she probably did. Also, my mother's a known thief, very dishonest person. So I wouldn't at all put it past her, in fact. But it's still a good analysis. Again, my point stands, is reiterated here. It's all about gender.
Today, Joe Biden gave the greatest 10-second summation of all of United States foreign policy when he was asked about bombing Yemen. So he was asked if bombing Yemen and the Houthis is effective, and this was his response.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working?
Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Are they what? Yes. What was the last
thing?
Are
they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue happening? Yes.
Right. I mean, I was scolded by one of our members in last Thursday's Unregistered Live about getting excited about Yemen and calling them heroic in trying to stop the slaughter of children in Gaza, which is, I think, what they're doing. I mean, they might be doing other things too. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they have multiple motives, but I'm quite sure that they are truly inspired by the for many reasons by what's going on in Gaza, and they want to stop it. Man, fuck yeah! In this moment, hella heroic. Same for South Africa, but especially, man, these Houthi fighters, Ansar Allah fighters. They haven't killed a single person, by the way. Not a single crew member on any of those ships has been killed. Not one. Say that for the United States or Israel in their military operations ever. Even when they do little minor military operations, they always manage to kill 3 or 4 people. Ever notice that? This is stopping shipping through the Red Damn Sea, and they haven't killed one person in doing that. That's 20% of the world trade. They have stopped from military action without killing a single person against essentially the world superpowers. The United States, Israel, and NATO are all against them, and we're forming a coalition and then started shooting them. Now it's just the US, though, because the whole coalition fell apart because Lloyd Austin got sick, had to go to the hospital. And most importantly, Europe was like, you know what? France, I think it was in the coalition for like a week. This is 2 weeks ago. They were like, yeah, we're gonna join with you and go fight those Yemenis because we have to have free shipping in the Red Sea. Absolutely, Uncle Sam. And then they noticed that there were like 1 million people in the streets of every single city in the Middle East chanting for the fucking blood of everyone responsible for what's going on in Gaza. And they were like, you know what? Maybe we'll let you go attack those Houthis. We'll let Israel kill all the babies in Gaza, and we'll let the US kill all the poor sandal-wearing guys who've been fighting wars against the Saudis and the US for 7 years and winning. 8 years. The United States and Saudi Arabia laid siege to the poorest country in all of Asia, killing untold numbers of children and women and civilians. These guys won that shit, took control of much of the country, and you know what? They're still mad. They're still mad, and they're still quite allied ideologically and just emotionally to those very poor people just up the road in Gaza who are getting the exact same treatment. We think this is a cynical move by the Houthis? Are you crazy? These people are revolutionaries who just fought and won the war that they wish the people of Gaza could win. Of course. And, you know, I don't think they're interested in spreading a caliphate, and they're certainly not interested in like coming into Europe or the United States and establishing Islamic law here. I mean, are you crazy? This is about what it's about. In the moment, I don't see any reason not to think right now in this moment, those people are our heroes. Okay, so right wing, so you're super worried about these imaginary kids being raped in tunnels all over the world, apparently, but killing 12,000, 15,000 children is good? That's what has been said? Okay. Drag Queen Story Hour. Oh my God. The horrors of the Drag Queen Story Hour. What is happening to the children? They're listening to drag queens tell stories. The threat to children. But now it's like, well, no, Israel must kill these children because don't you know they found Mein Kampf in an apartment in Gaza?
How did they find my iPad with the screen?
Did you see that video?
Yeah. With the iPad.
I mean, right? It's propaganda. It's shit like that. I'm like, people see that and they're like, oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was someone in Gaza like just staring at a photo of Hitler on their iPad, and then left it on when the bombing started.
Yeah, in a place with no electricity, like
just staring at Hitler. That's what they do all day long. They just love Hitler. Like they don't have enough of their own, you know, heroes. I mean, are you kidding? Like who are super anti-Israeli and often anti-Jewish, by the way? You know, yes. Like don't have enough of their own heroes to look at. In fact, they do. In fact, that's what they do. They have all these martyrs and pictures and posters all over the goddamn place in every Middle Eastern city of all these people who have died in the fight against Israel. They got plenty of their own heroes. They don't need fucking Hitler to learn about why Jews can be evil. I mean, it's just so dumb. And these people, like some of my friends, who are professional intellectuals, highly educated, multiple college degrees, university degrees, see that and see that story. Yeah, Liz Wolfe of Reason magazine. And who else was it who doubled down on that? Some person I know who's like very, very smart person. She posted that and said, all those people have been denying this rape. They're going to be hiding in their bunkers today. It's like, okay.
We had real quick while you're talking, we had a $10 Rumble super chat from Fuego de Bacero. Jesus, finally somebody calling it out as it is with Patrick Bet David. They are so not qualified for what they are discussing.
I mean, it's just not even, and I'm not talking, not just on Israel, which is fine. If it's just one issue, that's fine. I mean, can't be expert on everything, but like, no, I've watched their show many times and those cats are meatheads. I mean, that's what they are. They're kind of likable. I don't think I would probably like watching the UFC with them. That's what guys like that are great for, is like watching the UFC.
Mafia interviews. They have good mafia interviews.
Fuck yeah. Yeah. And business stuff, maybe, you know, I would at least listen to him. He's successful, you know. Sure. I respect him on that and some other things too. Yeah. But my God, when it comes to just like culture, respect. Oh, that's what it was. What was it? He had some long thing about, oh yeah, LGBT and grooming and like not pedophilia, but like, yeah, he did this whole history of the LGBT movement. Oh, you want to learn that from him, from PBD. And he was the whole thesis, he was just like leading, the whole thing was like leading always since Stonewall to the present was leading toward grooming and the trans movement. Just unbelievable. He knows nothing. Nothing. Okay. Man. I mean, I really don't trash podcast. I try not to trash anybody who's in my field. Unless, I mean, but he's so successful, it doesn't matter. He's not gonna dent his popularity. And he has enormous influence. So I think we have to kind of criticize people at that level. I mean, I wouldn't go after anybody who's like, struggling to make an audience, but Jesus, Lord of mercy, dude. You're doing tremendous damage to the world. I mean, I will say this, though. He does have good guests. He actually has people on there. I'm like, oh, good. Well, you'll learn something from this guy. This is good. And that's very healthy. I think he does that deliberately.
Yeah.
To learn. And that's a very healthy thing, It doesn't mean he should then have a podcast, but I think it's a very healthy thing intellectually for himself. And he clearly doesn't learn enough from his guests. But yeah, he has very good people on there. I don't know who who does his booking. I don't know if it's just him who comes up with that, but he's got good taste for sure. So, I mean, I watch Tim Pool all the time, and he's got all sorts of masculinist, juvenile shit that I can't stand. But dude is really smart, and he's really smart. And he really knows a lot of stuff. I do respect him. I just wish he weren't such a boy with gamer chairs and like stuffed boar's heads or whatever it is on his wall and guns and knives everywhere and all. I mean, it's just so. Which leads into some dumb politics, by the way, especially around grooming and all this gender shit. The grooming thing is about, I think it's about emasculated right-wing, very young men with very little experience sexually and have never been in a and don't lead a family, don't have a family. It's a way for them to kind of exert that masculine power, is to sort of fantasize openly about protecting kids, I guess, or whatever, or hating the guys who are whoever they think are groomers or whatever. I can't explain it any other way. There's some kind of compensation going on. It's just so bizarre and irrational otherwise. I mean, they're saying pedophiles everywhere, and I don't come on, gender, man. It's amazing. When the feminists invented gender analysis in the 80s, some could say Foucault did, but there was a whole cohort of feminist women, the people we can't stand now. I can't stand them now. I can't stand any of them now. But then in the 70s and 80s and 90s, they came up with this set of theories about the centrality of gender in the way societies think and operate, that I just think is one of the most powerful analyses I've ever come across. It's as powerful as economic analyses. It's as powerful as other cultural analyses of societies, like the big explanations of why things happen. Why do we go to war? Why was there a depression? Why do we have capitalism? Why is there democracy? The big stuff. Look at gender. Just look at any issue through gender, and you can look at it and be a completely conservative right-winger. This is what Jordan Peterson. Oh, by the way, Jordan Peterson, this is when he's at his smartest, in my view. Peterson's smartest stuff, for me, is his discussions of gendered archetypes. Now, I think the whole Jungian archetype trans-historical thing is ridiculous and nonsense, but nothing stays constant over thousands of years. But anyway, I mean, there certainly have been some tropes that have been recurring, I would say. And the point is, though, that these are gendered ideas, gendered assumptions that Peterson's talking about, right? That guide the ways in which we think about ourselves and the world. That's much of what Peterson's doing, is gender analysis. He's doing it from the right wing, which is beautiful. It's a conservative gender analysis. And you'll get that from a lot of Christian theologians too. The Bible's full of gender.
Well, I mean, with Peterson, you got to bring up Paglia as well. Sexual personae and
bingo.
Yeah.
She invented right-wing gender analysis. Mm-hmm. Exactly. She took what the feminists gave us and just sort of flipped it around, used the same tools of analysis, right? And the same questions, and then just inverted the answers. Right. It's for feminists, it was a history of oppression of women has resulted from this stuff. And for her, it was oh, well, actually, women have had power and women have had pleasure. And,
Yeah.
I actually don't know Paglia. We need to do I want to do something about Paglia.
The chat right now is drinking the Haterade. We've got a $2 super chat from Handyman Tennessee. Tim Pool is terrible. Patrick Bet David is terrible.
Thanks, Handyman.
Yep.
But you're half wrong or half right.
Yeah.
Tim Pool's not terrible. What are you talking about?
He got it. He was yelling at Clint the other night about Trump and COVID because he's on the Trump train right now. Tim Pool is, and Trump is the father of the vaccine, and Trump has never had a come to Jesus moment about his responsibility in the vaccine. He's never had a come to Jesus moment being responsible for the lockdowns, and I think this is something that the right really needs to contend with, and Tim Pool was tired of hearing about it and kind of spurred out on it.
Well, first of all, Tim Pool's not always right. I never said that. I mean, but yeah. I think he's always a very serious thinker. That's why I like him. I mean, I think he's a serious thinker. I can see him taking ideas seriously, thinking through them all the way, doing actual research, asking important questions, following up on things, not letting his ego get too enmeshed in certain points. You know, he's open. He's intellectually open is what I mean. On this particular issue, who's taking Trump's side?
Well, Tim Pool is taking Trump's side, or he's just screaming, "I'm tired about hearing about this." He's said enough. He said the vaccine was voluntary. He thinks that should be enough for it.
And Clint is going in on Trump for
Clint Russell and Luke Rudkowski are saying that's not enough. He really needs to acknowledge his role that he played,
which is the Jeffrey Tucker position.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey has been hammering Trump on COVID since day zero, since the very beginning, since Trump signed the order for the lockdown, right? I mean, and like the whole MAGA right was like, oh, well, he didn't really do that or whatever. I forget he did it. I don't know what the rationale was. They kind of somehow let that slip. Like, what? Because then for the next 2 years, all the MAGA right was screaming about was the lockdowns. Trump started that and the vaccine. And the two things the MAGA right cohered around, the two things that the new right, which I had this sort of COVID right, there was a whole new COVID right that emerged. I dated someone who was like part of who was never political until then, and she sort of became right wing because of COVID. This is a big phenomenon. A lot of people are like that. And now we're kind of looking at each other like, oh, wait, no, I don't want to be with you at all. You're an absolute idiot on everything else, including her. But anyway, take that back. It's not true.
Well, yeah, a lot of hippies, a lot of just naturalist hippies who
it's the weirdest coalition. I remember I did a little political work during COVID around that. I kind of joined. There was a group here. I forget what it's called, but we had a couple meetings and we're doing some stuff here. And it was it was like hippies, right wingers, libertarians, some like, sort of lefty Bernie Sanders hippie, but like all these sort of alt hippie, like alt medicine types, alt health types came out of the woodwork, and like I was like, I don't know if I want to hang out with you too long.
Yeah, Naomi Wolf joining the right wing.
Naomi Wolf, great example, right? Naomi Wolf being a daily regular on the Steve Bannon War Room show tells you everything. There it is. That was the bizarre COVID coalition. Anyway, so Jeffrey Tucker, who has been, I think, the leading intellectual on COVID since the jump. He's the founder of the Brownstone Institute, basically the author and the organizer of the Great Barrington Declaration. I am fortunately forgetting all this stuff, and I would like it all. I would love this issue to just disappear. I would like to never think about it again. I hated even just thinking about it and debating it. Anyway, if you're going to listen to one person, listen to Jeffrey Tucker. And he's been saying since the beginning, why are you defending Trump? He's as responsible as anybody for the lockdowns and the vax. Are you nuts? He literally created the vax. Huh? Operation Warp Speed. In fact, he made it go fast, which made it more dangerous. Warp Speed? Is that a good idea for a mass vaccination? That's Trump, baby. So MAGA has never taken accountability for that. Trump is certainly MAGA's never held him accountable for that, I should say. MAGA has never held Trump accountable because they're the ones who are the leading anti-vax, anti-lockdown force in this country. That's why I liked them for a couple of years. That's why a lot of people that's why they were good. Very good for a couple of years. Very socially valuable for a couple of years because they did that. They were the leading edge in the fight against the COVID tyranny. So Clint's of course right. Clint's always right. I think.
Yeah.
So I don't know what Poole's up to, but yeah, I mean, anyway, it doesn't matter. I mean, I just think the format and type of show and the politics of the show are similar to PBD. It's just, I'm just saying Poole is like an example of a good version of that. PBD is embarrassing. I think he's even bigger than Poole, right?
Yeah, at this point, I think so. Yeah, because I mean, he had Kobe Bryant's last interview before he died, and I think that really skyrocketed him.
Oh,
yeah, and
oh yeah, he kind of got that. He kind of got like the sports celebrity hip hop world a little bit. I think. Yeah. Well, I mean, just goes to show you, anybody can have a podcast. Anybody can have a podcast, and anybody, can have a Twitter account too. Let's never forget that. Anybody can have a Twitter account, and anybody can have an anonymous Twitter account. The schizophrenic guy on the corner shitting on the sidewalk, he can have an anonymous Twitter account and say anything he wants to you right now.
This is one of Owen Benjamin's great jokes is before Twitter, you used to have Greyhound bus stations, and that's where you would go to hear all the crazy opinions.
That's awesome. That brings me back. That's another funny memory. Like I loved and when I was in college, and I did this even later in life, but I remember in college I spent a lot of time on Greyhound buses, like in the Midwest, like where you are. I remember being in the Indianapolis Greyhound station multiple times in the 1980s and 90s, and I just loved it, man. Like there was nothing like pulling up to the Detroit Greyhound station in a bus like in 1987. It was it truly like amazing. You just see just the most incredible people, and you would see like the bottom of society. It was like, oh, this is who's here. I see. This is what goes on. And I was so young, it wasn't depressing yet. I mean, now it would just depress me, but no, it's a good thing to do. I recommend it. It's also very cheap. Great way to travel between states.
So the COVID thing is relevant again in that the World Economic Forum is meeting, and they had a panel to discuss a hypothetical disease. And a lot of headlines didn't realize that this was a hypothetical disease and started scaring people thinking there's another pandemic. But they had a big panel discussing a hypothetical disease X that would be 20 times more dangerous than COVID and what to do in response to that.
Why do we care about Davos again? Like this is another one of those COVID era phenomena that I'm now reconsidering. It's important. I mean, I was down with the whole, I had a guy on the show. I had a guy who was in New York. Only time I've ever had a New York Times reporter on my show. Wow. And it did not go real well for him because he didn't know who I was. But he was a Davos. He wrote this anti-Davos book, but he had the exact wrong argument about Davos. But I'm just saying, I'm like, I used to think Davos was a thing and important, and wow, we need to watch these people, and gosh, this is the elite and they run the world a little bit. And I was like, and now I actually think it's a big ass distraction, and we need to be focused on our own national governments, and especially in this country. The globalist discourse, the anti-globalist discourse, it's not wrong, but it's exaggerated, and it ends up redirecting our attention to institutions that are actually secondary at most. Davos is simply a meeting place for elites of various countries to share ideas. Now, to follow what they're thinking, sure, watch Davos. I get it. But like what's happened is the right wing has started to look at Davos as the center of power, as if Klaus Schwab calls the shots somehow. No, he really super doesn't, unless you believe in a true conspiracy in which Klaus Schwab and I guess pedophiles are direct telling Joe Biden what to do. Pretty sure that's not happening. I'm pretty sure Klaus Schwab doesn't tell Biden anything. I'm pretty sure Biden never thinks about Klaus Schwab. I don't think anybody in the Senate or the Congress does either. I think they do what they do for other reasons, and I think we need to watch those reasons. But yeah, I mean, it's a place where they share these ideas, and of course, the ideas are usually terrible. And so it's a good place. It's simply a good place to look at what the elites are thinking. And so what are they saying now? That COVID's coming back?
Not that COVID's coming back, but that
Becoming
there
worse.
that at any point in time, I mean, the World Health Organization has been saying this since 2018, that there will be another virus at any point in time, that we need to be prepared for it. And they're discussing just even more intense lockdowns. But to your hypothesis about Davos not being that big of a deal, or not being that big of a cabal, potentially Javier Milei exposed that by taking 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and giving a libertarian bullet point speech, boilerplate libertarian speech about the greats of free market capitalism and calling out socialism. And he's not in any trouble for that. He just showed up, gave a speech, and left.
Well, I don't know what that guy is. I just found out that he did you know where his first, I guess this is right, I haven't checked it, but his first trip outside of Argentina was, where he went?
Was it Israel?
No.
Uh,
Well, again, I need to confirm this. I'm
Mhm.
not. Someone said it was Brooklyn,
oh, yeah.
and in fact, it was the Lubavitcher synagogue.
Yeah, he's been there. Yeah, I know
Yeah,
that.
he was on top of the tunnels like a week ago.
Mhm.
You know, where they're fucking a lot of kids all the time, which I don't think Javier Milei approves of. So he needs to get to the bottom of this quickly. I don't know what he's about. I don't know. I really don't know. I just don't know. I certainly don't trust him, and I certainly, because of all the foreign policy weirdness, the Jewish weirdness, his own weirdness. Again, speaking of ultra masculine juvenile men, Jesus, he's a classic example of the libertarian man-child. Classic example. Goodness, I can think of so many American libertarian men who are replicas of him. They just speak English. But so Davos allowed him to give his free market rant.
Mhm.
And therefore what?
Well, it might boost your hypothesis that this isn't like a cabal of elites where you are selected to push the narrative and that everybody is on board with the same thing, that it's just a bunch of world leaders. And the fact that there's such a uniformity of opinion might hint at what Curtis Yarvin talks about with the cathedral, that they all come from the same universities and they're just all on board because that's who they are. It's not like they're meeting behind smoke-filled rooms and agreeing on stuff. It's just
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this can be explained by what's called liberal consensus theory, which is just that, you know, Davos, Western Europe, the United States are so dominated by liberal thinking, liberal ideology, that they can tolerate. It's also been called repressive tolerance by the Marcuse Frankfurt School. They see it, the Frankfurt School sees it as more a liberalism trying to like actively destroy dissent. I'm not sure. I think the liberal consensus theory is more apt, which is just that it's so dominant, they're not threatened. And therefore, sure, we'll listen to the little wacky libertarian guy give his little speech. Look at him, look at his hair. And then they'll have 5 straight panels on Greta Thunberg's life against climate change. So you know what I mean? Like, it's that, sure, they'll allow the little like weirdo to show, the theory goes that this would be Marcuse's theory, to show that they are, you know, very open-minded and not a cabal and not conspiratorial. We'll even let the free market guys talk. Look how crazy we are. When, of course, his ideas will never gain any traction whatsoever. And he will most likely be edged out of the international community for various. I mean, again, if he plays the foreign policy game correctly, he won't be. And maybe that's what this was actually. Maybe this was them saying, you know, oh, we'll give you, this is your first prize for playing our game, for being pro-Israel, pro-NATO, pro-US, pro-dollar, most importantly. Maybe, you know, Davos did that to sort of say, welcome, Javier. We'll listen to your crazy ideas about domestic economics because you're down with the big program, which is our program.
Potentially maybe mainline libertarianism, all this anti-state stuff, all this free market stuff, isn't that threatening to their world order, that they actually like some of that stuff sometimes because it allows for wealth creation that they can then use and exploit when it's useful.
Well, they're corporatists.
Mm-hmm.
So that requires the creation of massive corporations with which to align themselves with the state to manage society. So corporatism, of course, is the co-management of society by big corporations and the state, which is what the United States is. We're like almost thoroughly now a corporatist entity, right? I mean, all the big stuff, all the major decisions and sort of implementation of policies is all done through that nexus of the state and corporations, right? So now the thing again, you have to have the big corporations to make that work. And that's what it was in Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany, of course, had major corporations by the 1930s. And so they kind of invented the corporatist state model. And the United States sort of was inventing it at the same time. But they already had big. So Argentina needs some big corporations. I mean, they have some, but their economy could be a lot bigger. And so once I would think if I were a Davos type guy, I would be thinking, yeah, let him be super pro business and build up the business base in Argentina. And then they're going to have some economic crisis and we'll swoop in with a loan to bail them out. But as a condition of that loan, they will have to, of course, have some state regulation. And so that we can then control the Argentine economy. Is my guess. I don't know. That'd be like the long game if they're really that smart. I'm not sure if they're even thinking that way. But, that's another reason why I think they would allow him. Again, libertarians, man, people. This guy. I mean, listen, I've been saying that. I used to say this to socialists all the time because every 4 to 8 years was some goddamn socialist to be like, I'm running for president. Everybody get really excited for a week. Like Cornel West recently, same thing. And I'd be like, guys, that's not the fight. You don't try to become the president. The fight is everywhere else. The fight is in culture and media, maybe running for local office, but mostly it's a cultural fight. You got to change people's minds. You don't just run for president. That's not how you change millions of people's minds. And if you win the presidency, what happens every single time? Every time some radical wins the presidency in any country, what do? Immediately, they become conservatives and they start locking up dissidents and they start repressing speech. And then they have some factional fight from within their party and they start killing or exiling or silencing all their political opponents within their own party. And then they become a dictatorship. I mean, this is like every time a radical takes control. South African ANC, Nelson Mandela, what happened as soon as they took power? Like same thing. It just became like a political bloodbath. Super repressive in all sorts of ways. But yeah, fuck this guy.
You're talking about repressive tolerance. The number one threat that the World Economic Forum posed as being the number one concern for all countries in the future is disinformation. Ursula von der Leyen had a big speech about that. Even more important than climate change, even more important than any other psyop is the disinformation agenda.
I want to know this whole Palestine thing, how it's shifting politics in general. I think it's going to have wide-ranging effects. I think it's going to change politics on many issues, and this might be one of them. So, I'm thinking there's probably a lot of people who are pro-Palestine, but also pro-Ukraine.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of liberals. Yeah.
Liberals who I would call like liberal Zionists. So they're like critical of Israeli policy, but they still want Israel to be a state. And on everything else, they're just Democrats.
And well, I've heard a lot of people say Russia is a colonizing force in Ukraine and Israel is a colonizing force in Palestine. I've heard that argument a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah. So I would say to those people, which is basically most Democrats, I think most Democrats are pro-Palestine and pro-Ukraine. I would say to them, have you noticed the disinformation recently being put out by the pro-Israel side? You notice this at all? Like pretty heavy, huh? Pretty amazingly bad and dumb and false and crazy, right? Because, it's a government. That's what governments do in wartime, guys. They put out garbage propaganda every single time. Every government does that. So you know that war that's also happening up north there that you also support in a different way? You know, you might want to rethink what's been said from the Ukrainian government, especially now that we found out that they actually lost the goddamn war. After they've been telling us for 2.5 years they were winning, killing Russians all the time, killing so many Russians. We're just killing Russians like you cannot believe. Turned out other way around. Now we're talking 300,000 dead Ukrainians, probably. That's the current number I'm hearing. 300,000 dead. That's not counting the ones missing legs and arms and eyeballs, which is another, I don't know, 6-figure number. But yeah, the disinformation, I mean, Jesus Christ, if you take any government seriously at all, especially during wartime, you know nothing about politics. You are a baby when it comes to politics. You shouldn't believe one word from any, and that, you know, Hamas too. I mean, like any warring entity will lie through its teeth. Of course it has to. I would too if I were running some government during a war. So it'll be interesting to see how these very short-lived alliances around COVID and now Palestine will affect American politics broadly. One thing that we're seeing, COVID did not defeat the Democrats at the polls. We thought it would. We thought, right? Remember, the red wave was going to be all about like revenge for COVID policies, and well, Gavin Newsom would never see the light of day again. And look who's going to be our next president.
Well, I think that's largely Trump's fault, because the right wing did not have a substantial opposition to COVID.
Well, I mean, I think it's just simply that American people just didn't care enough. Mm-hmm. They weren't as mad as the right wing was about COVID. Mm-hmm. The right wing is still mad about COVID. I mean, I don't care anymore. I just don't care. I forget about it easily. But no, Americans just didn't vote. They didn't vote against the COVID governors. Gavin Newsom's still the goddamn governor. And not only that, he's about to be president. And he was, they should have Andrew Cuomo'd him. But they did. Cuomo was the only one who got punished. Isn't that wild? So COVID didn't fuck up the Democrats. And Palestine is now being predicted as the next thing that will fuck up the Democrats. Because apparently, all the Zoomers are pro-Hamas now, not just like pro-Palestine. Apparently, like some big chunk of Zoomers in some poll said that they're pro-Hamas and want to give Israel to Hamas. I mean, I think that's sort of like deep ignorance combined with like good instincts about some issue. I don't know. But they're not going to be pro-Israel ever. Yeah, I mean, I don't. So, so the Democrats are going to lose a bunch of the Zoomer vote, the young vote, which is crucial for them. And certainly in the future, it's crucial. They might lose Michigan because there's a giant Arab community in Michigan, especially in Dearborn and Detroit. Huge, giant. And those people are really anti-Biden right now, as you might imagine. But even like California, I don't know, like California might even be in play because there's such a big left-wing pro-Palestine presence here. But I don't know. We'll see. I sure hope it destroys the Democrats. I hope anything destroys the Democrats, but I think this might do it, or at least meaning it'll lose the election for them. Although I got to think, unless they put Trump in prison, or unless there's going to be how many more October surprises between now and the election, right? God, what else are they going to pull on Trump? But assuming he's actually running in all the states, it seems unstoppable. I mean, Biden can't possibly assemble enough votes this time without, again, or they'll cheat.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or they'll kill Biden and put Gavin in, which is, I'm sure they all want to do. I would assume that every single Democrat wants to kill Biden right now, and replace him with Newsom
or Michelle Obama.
And what is it with these right wingers who still think that Michelle Obama is a man?
Have you seen her back?
Come on, man.
Have you seen her back muscles?
Have you seen Serena Williams play tennis? And Serena Williams is most definitely a woman. A lot of black women have a lot of muscle tone. They do. What?
Yeah. Well, I was going to pivot to you were talking about voter enthusiasm. The Iowa caucus turnout was pretty low. It was like 110,000 as opposed to 186,000 in 2016.
Yep.
We're looking at a pretty low enthusiasm voting populace on both sides. I think both are just worn out and don't have anything to be excited for.
My third personal anecdote here. My uncle Bill Russell, who's a historian at Graceland College in Lamoni, Iowa. He's lived there for 60 years. He has run the Iowa caucuses for the Democratic Party my whole life. So I don't know if he's still doing it because he's in his 80s, but he's a big dude in the Iowa caucuses and always has been. He's met every single president since, I think, Eisenhower. But it's weird because he lives in the shittiest, tiniest, fucked up nowhere town on this flat plain in the middle of a cornfield with one stoplight and a gas station. And he has immense political power because of the way we organize our politics, although I guess the Electoral College is good. So anyway, Trump. And it's funny, the caucuses, they literally pass a paper bag around.
Yeah.
Or a hat or something like that and just put, it's really informal, which I guess is cool. I don't know. This doesn't matter.
Well, you see them like counting ballots on the floor on their hands and knees, like it's a game of dice or like it's a game of jacks.
Yeah. I mean, if it's a close election, I'm sure they're a little bit more careful about it, but they knew what was going to happen this time. Yeah. So, right. Trump walked away with it. And so Vivek dropped out?
Vivek dropped out, is endorsing Trump, met him at a speech in New Hampshire, and is probably vying for a VP slot or a cabinet position. You were talking about the presidency not being something that actually affects change. And I think what Vivek accomplished was pushing certain issues and talking points into the mainstream that hadn't been mainstream before, like Great Replacement Theory, January 6th, political prisoners, stuff like that, and pushing Trump to the right when Trump has been pretty much out of touch.
Yeah, man. I used to care about all those issues a lot. I guess it's the Palestine thing. I don't know. I really have this thing where until they stop killing kids, I just can't get excited about January 6th, or even though they're holding political prisoners and have for years, and they're sending them to prison for decades, utterly unjust, grotesque oppression of people. And I've always known that. Not only that, they were framed, they were set up. Absolutely an agent provocateur op, that our good friend Brandon Caserta was the victim of in Michigan. Everyone should check out Brandon Caserta's awesome episode on Unregistered about a year ago. He was one of the people who was put in jail for allegedly plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. Spent a year and a half in a jail, not a prison. They never sent him to a prison. He spent a year and a half in a jail, local jail, which he shared a cell, I think, with 16 other men. He was the only white guy for a year and a half in that jail cell. Finally acquitted and exonerated. 2 other guys, though, went to prison for life for it, even though it was 2/3 FBI agents and informants who were involved in the operation. Or 3/4, 2/3 of the men who were involved in the alleged kidnapping plot were working for the FBI. And of course, those were the people who were like, we should do this. We should drive to her house and snatch the bitch. So, and we just know, come on, there's so much evidence, so much circumstantial evidence, so much historical evidence, like they had just done this in Michigan. We know the FBI had all sorts of people in the crowd there. And I mean, I'd bet everything. I'd bet everything. I'd bet my life that they had multiple agents and informants in the crowd who were urging the crowd to go in to the Capitol building. There's no doubt about it. Ray Epps, I know there's like all this back and forth about him, and he's had this denial. It's just, come on. How could you explain that video of him constantly telling people to go in, go in?
Hey, they gave him probation, so he didn't get off scot-free. So
shit is so stinky from top to bottom. Darren, what's his name? Darren Beatty. He's the man on that. And Julie Kelly. Julie Kelly's actually done the reporting. Darren's done a lot of the analysis. That's really good. But they're right.
Beatty was talking today about the pipe bombs and how there's some new security footage of the pipe bombs being quote unquote discovered that looks very suspect. That looks like. Yeah.
Here's the thing about the Trump people. Mm-hmm. They're all about being American patriots. They're not about like blowing stuff up. They're not about being chaotics. They love America and they want it to keep it. They want to preserve it. That's their, mythos. They want to preserve it, keep it whole, protect it. They're not going to be like, they're not about attacking great American institutions like the U.S. Congress, the Capitol building, blowing up Washington, D.C. That's not them. They're about had the people taking it over. They're Jacksonians. Andrew Jackson famously let the people into the White House when he won the presidency for a tour. It's kind of that. Mm-hmm. And sort of presented himself as this populist, representing the people, called them the mudsills of America. I represent them, people on the bottom. But it was this veneration of both the people and America simultaneously. American populism has always been patriotic and nationalistic and in a religious sense. I mean, they revere America. They love America. They want to devote their lives to America. Their greatest heroes are the men who gave their lives, literally gave their lives for America, police officers and soldiers. They don't want to desecrate the great institutions of the United States. That's not who they are. Could there have been 2 or 3 MAGA dudes who got real drunk and brought a gun or two? Of course, but they're not as a movement. That's not who they are at all. The left, of course, is the ones who, and I'm kind of with the left on this, but they're the ones who want to desecrate American institutions. Like me, I don't give a fuck about the Capitol building. I don't want to desecrate it. I don't care about it. If it does get desecrated, so the left, it does that stuff. The left is the one who is more likely to be chaotic and violent. Of course, we know this at rallies, at political demonstrations. The right historically doesn't do that stuff. Mm-hmm. They don't, for obvious reasons, because they're conservatives. They're about family values. They're about, most importantly, this country. They love this country. At least that's what they think. So they're not about destroying things, attacking institutions.
You were talking about foreign policy sort of eclipsing all other issues. I have a feeling that in this presidential run-up, once we get to the 2 main candidates and you start having debates again, if we even see debates again, that neither candidate will be asked a substantive foreign policy question. There wasn't a single foreign policy question asked of Joe Biden in 2020. There wasn't a single foreign policy question asked on any of the debate stages in 2020.
Different now. They have no now because of Ukraine and now Israel. They have to. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, no, I think. I mean, no, it's too heavy. Both of those, especially Israel now. Mm-hmm. There has to be some questions about it. Thank God. I mean, that's the one good thing about what's going on in Gaza is that, and Ukraine too, is that we Americans finally have been forced to talk about this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm optimistic about that, not because they're smart people who are interested in foreign affairs, but just they have to, because much of the voting public wants to know, actually.
And will Biden and Trump have differing opinions? Will Americans be actually given a choice? Will they actually have substantive different opinions on this stuff?
I was thinking about this today, about Trump and Israel. Mm-hmm. And, it's pretty clear that he got most of his Israel ideas from Jared. And Jared is an absolute bonehead, by the way, who thinks he said this. He says anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. I mean, that's the level we're dealing with. I wonder what Trump himself really feels about it. I know he's made lots of statements about his love for Israel, and he's a New York businessman who clearly did a lot of dealings with Jews over the years, because you would just have to in New York real estate. I'm sure he knows umpteen zillion Jews, and I'm sure many of them are his close allies and friends. And he has lots of Jewish lawyers and all that. But does the dude really care? Was he really a Zionist? I doubt it. And so I'm wondering what he'll do on day one with Netanyahu. I kind of feel like if Netanyahu's still bombing children, which would be pretty amazing, if Netanyahu bombs children for another, 11 months, or I guess a year before Trump takes power, another year. But he could go on in some form or another. I'm sure that, they'll find some ways to kill some Palestinian kids to mow the lawn further. I think Trump will just call his ass up and say, "Yo, Beeb, we're done now." I do. I even think he'd do it right now, because even like Gavin McInnes last night was talking about the other night, how he wants a ceasefire now. I was like, Gavin wants it, like Mr. Pro-Israel. I mean, other pro-Israel people are not there yet, but even the pro-Israel people are now calling for a ceasefire, because it's just, they're really tired of killing kids. And women. Where it's probably 30,000 now total civilians dead, but it's at least 25, and half are kids. Congratulations, by the way, to everyone, on that side. You get that on your resume for the rest of your life. I supported the killing. I supported Israel's campaign that killed 15,000 kids and counting. Like, you get that on your resume forever. And yeah, no, some of us will never forget. I've never been this pissed about something. Nothing. Never. I mean, even supporters of the Iraq war were less bothersome to me. This is hard. But anyway, all right, man, we got to go, don't we?
Yeah. It's funny, just to wrap up, I think that was the point that Patrick Bet David was trying to get Bassem Youssef to entertain, was that Trump would be a strong man and put a stop to it all. I think that's what he was trying to get him to entertain we know Trump loves to be the hero. He's done similar things before, never with such consequence, but he likes to sort of swoop in and like go take a visit to the dictator and talk him down from whatever it is. And at least that's how it's presented, and he did actually, from what we could tell, a decent job with that with North Korea. North Korea was quiet for a while there after he met with Kim. And I mean, Saudis, of course, that's not a good thing, but like he made a deal with the Saudis, very close to the Saudis. He's very good at talking to dictators for some maybe obvious reasons. Netanyahu's a dictator too, to some extent now. Any leader during a war is a dictator. So, but yeah, I think so. And then I don't know but then what's he going to do? What the Israelis are going to then be on his ass for something. They're going to want something. They're going to want, what they want is two things. And then we'll go, but this is pretty important. Well, it's very clear that the Israelis want two things. They want to force Egypt to take all the Gazans. They want to push all the Gazans out into the Sinai, into Egypt. Egypt's refusing to do that. They've tried to bribe Egypt from the beginning of the war. Offers by the U.S. and Israel of huge loans and loan guarantees and all this stuff. Egypt has still said no. So they would probably press Trump to press Egypt. And ultimately, Trump could force Egypt to do that. It'd take like a massive operation to force them to, but he could. The second thing they want is war with Iran. They want straight up bombing night and day of Iran. They want to destroy the entire military. They want regime change. They want the whole joint. And they want the U.S. to do it because the U.S. can do it. And they would demand that Trump would do that. And that's way scarier, because that could happen, since Trump, as we know, has a hard-on for going to war with Iran too. All the military guys he hired at the beginning of his term, like Mathis, had particular beefs with Iran because Iranian militias had killed their men in battle. John Bolton. He hired John Bolton for Christ's sake.
Bolton, Mathis, what's his face? Mick, what's his face? Anyway. Yeah, they're what characterized the early Trump foreign policy team was a hatred of Iran. That was their number one issue. So, and of course, Jared wants that. And, you know, so that's it, everybody. I mean, it's right now. I mean, the kids in Gaza, that's at stake in the immediate term. But in the longer term, it is war with Iran that we're looking at. Houthis are allied with Iran. So we're at war with an ally of Iran right now. We're also really at war with Iran anyway. But it could become a full-scale assault on Iran at any moment. And I think Trump could do that. I think Biden can do that. We'll see. But that's what Israel wants. And we think they are good for U.S. interests. We think it's a good idea to support that country, the country that wants to push 2 million people into the desert and go to war with one of the largest militaries on earth. That's what Israel wants.
As Nikki Haley puts it, we don't. Israel doesn't need us. We need Israel.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. To take us 6 feet under, for sure. All right, my brother. Unregistered Live coming up. Our live Zoom meeting for patrons of this show and unregistered. Go to patreon.com/unregistered. That URL right there. Become a patron and join us at Unregistered Live every Thursday night after Unreported. Michael and I hang out in our Zoom room and talk to our patrons and have a good time. So please come on in. And Michael, thank you, dude.
Yeah, thanks. See you over there.
Peace.